Welcome to Front Office Pros. I'm Steve and this is Joe. Today, we're going to be talking about league losers. So these are players that you may have been relying upon during the course of the regular season, but now that we're in playoffs, these players could cost you your opportunity for a championship. So Joe, let's get right into it. And we're going to talk about 3 players per position. So the first player we're going to be talking about as a league loser is quarterback Tua Tagovailoa.
Yeah, I think last week was kind of evidence of why Tua might not be the best quarterback for your playoff stretch with tough matchups. As San Fran was a tough matchup and showing that the defense showed out and was able to shut down that offense. So, he is a little bit of concerning when he faces some tougher matchups on the stretch. I just think it might be worth a dart throw. It's for somebody better that'll potentially get you some more points.
Yeah, so those matchups are, should have mentioned them before, but we have Buffalo, Green Bay, and New England. And I might not have thought this way, but after what I saw happen at San Francisco, these are tougher defenses. And so not to say that Tua couldn't do well, but it's one of those things that when we were thinking about this segment, you got to have to leave the emotion out of it, and you may have to just play the better matchup. And, realistically, these matchups aren't great, Joe.
Yeah, it's the tough thing deciding between, do you just start your studs and you just keep on keeping on with what's got you there, or do you try to shake things up and go with some other riskier plays, but with the point upside?
Yeah, so our next league loser is quarterback Justin Fields. Justin Fields is going up against Philadelphia, Buffalo, and Detroit.
Yeah, this one hurts me a little bit, Steve. Fields is a guy that I've enjoyed riding the waves of the good matchups, and with his rushing ability and ability for those long touchdowns, I just feel like he always has a kind of a safe floor for you as well, but also improves that ceiling. But yeah, I have Fields in a league, and I've already kind of got things in prepare with Mike White on my team as well, and yeah, those matchups definitely aren't great.
Yeah, I think, people will see Detroit on there and they'll say, oh, well, what about that matchup? It's like, hey, Detroit's been really stingy of late. You can't just look based on, what the ranking will tell you, because the ranking will tell you that they're one of the worst, one of the best matchups for QBs. But, you really should be looking at the past few games as more of a sample size versus the entire year, because the season really does ebb and flow throughout the year.
Yeah, that's a pretty important point here as we reach the playoffs, and in a lot of these fantasy leagues, and as you're pushing for your championship run, you can't always rely on those rankings that you see in your platform. Really encourage people to look at the last few matchups for the opposing defense they have and see if they still are that poor, or have they improved.
Yeah, I mean, he could be somewhat of a more of a I guess he has a ceiling, so there is a possibility that he does still defy the matchup. But if you decide to continue to ride the wave, it could burn you. So you might want to have some other options to consider when you're starting quarterback. So on our last league loser, we've got quarterback Trevor Lawrence is going up against Dallas, the New York Giants, and Houston.
Yeah, those are some really tough matchups for Trevor Lawrence, and he's a guy that's started to play a little bit better of late here, but a guy that's kind of been he's kind of had his ups and downs this year and kind of a risky play. So, there's definitely other quarterbacks out there that you might be able to pick up off your waiver wire that I trust or have the ability to score more points and have a higher ceiling than Trevor Lawrence for sure.
Yeah, he's really showed himself as a ceiling play this year. There's times when he has a fantastic game, other days he just craters. I mean, I'm not too scared about the Houston matchup, but it really depends on game script. That team is so bad against running rush defense that they may not need to throw the ball. So you might want to decide to pivot to other options. So go over to the running backs, Joe. Our first league loser is running back Joe Mixon. He's going up against Tampa Bay, New England, and Buffalo.
Yeah, it's tough to say, that here's a prime example of, trust your studs and can they break through those matchups. I do think he potentially can, but it still is risky. I mean, we've seen, I know he's been battling the concussion, obviously, the last few weeks. We've also seen Pirine play really well, even that before that concussion that Mixon got, kind of saw Pirine getting involved in the passing game, a little more than what Mixon owners would like to see. And I would know because I am one. But definitely, want to have some pivot options because those are definitely some tough matchups down the stretch.
Yeah, not only you kind of alluded to it, not only tough matchups, but the things that concerns me is Samaje Perine has actually played really well. So they don't really have any reason to just give the boatload of the carries over to Joe Mixon. I could see them doing kind of a mix in carries, preserving Mixon and making sure that he's healthy for the playoffs. There's no real reason to get to have him be the bell cow when he comes back.
Yeah, I mean, that's a good point. I mean, this is a team that looking primed and ready for another Super Bowl run potentially here, with the Bengals. So they, as you mentioned, they might, given how well Perine's played, they might just be like, you know what, Joe, we're nursing you back from the concussion. We're just gonna take it slow here and let Perine do most of the work. Definitely could happen.
Yeah, and this team has kind of had some of its up and downs. This is a huge win for them against the Chiefs and puts them right back into the conversation as one of those teams that could come out of the AFC and be a Super Bowl, appear in the Super Bowl again. So we'll have to see. So next player that we're saying is a league loser is running back James Conner. He's got Denver, Tampa Bay, and Atlanta.
Yeah, James Conner, he's been a solid running back too for the most part. Early on he had his struggles, but then really since he came back from injury and they got rid of Benjamin and cleared the way for him, he's been pretty good and gotten the bulk of the carries. But yeah, those are some tough matchups. We'll see. I mean the Falcons, I think they might be a little lighter of a matchup, but I still don't like those other two matchups. So you probably can find someone else to pivot to.
Yeah, I think it would be wise to pivot to somebody else. I think Atlanta, when I've watched their games and from what I understand, their pass defense is brutal. But I have actually found sometimes their run defense has shown flashes where it actually is they're competent. So, but either way, I mean, the thing about Connor that's nice is he's been getting a bulk of the carries, especially like you said after the Benjamin release. But I'm concerned about these matchups. If it were great matchups, I would say he could be a league winner. But because of these matchups, it makes me think we might want to go elsewhere.
Yeah, like you said, yeah. If he'd had some better matchups, I think he could definitely have been over on the winner's side, especially with his ability to get in the end zone and the red zone as well.
Yeah, so our last league loser for the running backs is running back Kenneth Walker. He got San Francisco, Kansas City, and the New York Jets.
Kenneth Walker is a hot name there for a little bit, but even these last few weeks watching him, early on he was getting those big burst plays and long touchdown runs. You just haven't seen that as much as yards per carry have kind of gone down a little bit. Now he's got this ankle, which I've never heard an injury called a jammed ankle, so I don't really know what that means as far as the effect or long-term injury here. But given that and those tough matchups, yeah, I think you could probably, as hard as it might be, as you've been riding the wave of Walker, you might want to look elsewhere for sure.
Yeah, he might be the one player that I am most concerned about heading into the playoffs. I thought I actually in one of my leagues I picked him up in redraft right before it was actually, I'm trying to remember, it was right when there was a running back, you might know, Joe, I'm trying to remember, but there was a running back that went down and a rookie replaced him, and I was a week late, and then there was a huge amount of fab that went for the player. And so at that point, I was like, you know what? I'm going to make sure this doesn't happen to me with Walker. So I'm going to go pick up Walker in anticipation that Penny got injured. And Penny got injured, and I was able to pick him up for like pennies on a dollar. I can't remember who that was. Do you remember?
Yeah, I was trying to. I do remember that exact scenario that you were in there. I do forget who the rookie was that you wanted to pick up there, but weren't able to, because I do remember you saying you tried to get him but lost out on him.
Yeah, well, I'll have to think about it. I don't know. I remember it was not Rashad White. But anyways, besides the point, I thought Kenneth Walker was going to be a league winner from that point. And I think a lot of people talked about him possibly being a league winner, but the Niners defense is no joke. The Jets defense is no joke. And that jammed injury kind of makes me concerned. And he hasn't been as efficient lately, honestly. So I might be fading him completely. Out of all of those guys, I think he's the one I might be fading out the most.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, being that he's a rookie and this is the first season we're really seeing him on an NFL field, he has the easiest to fade. I mean, it's, Joe Mixon, who we've seen time and time again. And honestly, Mixon last year, probably won people a bunch of championships last year. So he's definitely a tougher one to fade, along with Connor. So yeah, by default, Walker definitely is the easiest.
I remember now it was Tyler Algier when Cordell Patterson went out. I tried to get him and then went for a ton of fab. And I was like, I'm gonna anticipate Penny will get hurt, so I'll pick up Walker, which that worked out pretty
Makes
well.
sense.
So our go over to the wide receivers now. So our next league loser is wide receiver Terry McLaurin. He's been hot, Joe, but he's going to have the New York Giants, the 49ers, and the Cleveland Browns.
Yeah, he definitely, he's been hot with Taylor Heineke, but with these matchups, I think there's potentially some other options that you could pivot to that could give you the higher ceiling, especially for the playoffs.
Yeah, and the other thing too is, I mean, they keep talking about how Wentz is not going to come in. Wentz is not going to come in. It seems like Rivera has to make that statement every time. I think it's Heineke's job. I'm not saying that, but you just never know. An injury happens. So if you're relying on Terry McLaurin to be that guy for you, I don't see it. And these matchups are pretty difficult. I think there's some other options that you'd be better off going with. So our next receiver we want to talk about, wide receiver Christian Kirk as a league loser. He's got Dallas, New York Giants, and Houston.
Yeah, I definitely feel stronger about the Christian Kirk than Terry McLaurin per se. But yeah, these matchups are pretty tough, especially the matchup against Dallas there. So I definitely, kind of the playoff primer here, definitely be looking for somebody with some better matchups than Kirk for your stretch playoff run here.
Especially when you consider we don't know with Lawrence's availability as either. He had that nasty looking tackle where he was tackled down and it looked like he was like getting twisted like a pretzel. So we'll see what his future looks like there. But I don't know. I think there's some other options. I've liked Kirk this year. He's been a great option. But you might want to consider some other ones. And in our last league loser for the receivers, this could come to a surprise for folks. But we're saying wide receiver Jaylen Waddle going up against Buffalo, Green Bay, and New England.
Yeah, this one is probably where people are like, "Oh my God, you guys are nuts," with Jaylen Waddle. But, we kind of seen it this past weekend. I know he was on and off the field with the ankle injury, but with the tough matchup of the 49ers, he didn't perform that well. And who knows, with this ankle, it could be a nagging thing that he deals with as well. So we've already seen him tough matchups, kind of being able to take him away. And if that happens during your playoffs, I mean, 1 for 19, you're going to be extremely disappointed, and that could cost you.
Well, and he relies upon his speed too. So it'll be interesting to see, like you said, as that injury kind of linger on and bother him to the point where it's affecting his play. I think Tyreek Hill defies the matchup. He's the type I firmly believe that for your ultimate studs, the guys who are like the cream of the crop, you don't bench guys. Like Devontae Adams is going to play against the 49ers, I believe, on the championship game. You don't bench Devontae Adams. Like that but Waddle's kind of that fringe guy. He has a lot of wide receiver 1 weeks. He's a great player, but I wouldn't get so emotionally attached that I end up, possibly losing my matchup because I played him instead of a better option.
Yeah, I think the difference is there, like you said, Tyreek Hill has shown he's an absolute stud of a wide receiver, stud for fantasy. And like you said, Waddle has shown the ability, but he's not at that level yet. So, and then given that a lot of his points have come off of big plays and long touchdowns, against these tougher defense, I just don't see those type of plays happening.
So transitioning over to the tight ends, our league loser, tight end David Njoku, got Baltimore Ravens, the New Orleans Saints, and the Washington Commanders.
Yeah, Njoku started the season off pretty strong. I always had my doubts on the guy, but not so much based on his talent, more so the quarterback situation. And while it was very good with Brissett, I don't really know what it's going to be like with Deshaun Watson. Watson looked terrible against Houston. Not sure what that's going to be like for the future. And then also, Njoku's kind of been battling injury here of late as well, so that kind of scares me, additionally.
Yeah, and I think all three of those teams that, they have well, I'm trying to think. Obviously, the Commanders' defense has been good. The Saints and the Ravens are kind of hit and miss depending. But I feel like, especially with Roquan Smith in the middle of that field, for the Ravens, and Patrick Queen, they're rangy linebackers. Same thing with Demario Davis with the Saints. So I think the concern is Watson looked so bad last Sunday. We just don't, and obviously Njoku wasn't in the game. We don't really know what it would look like for them to both be on the field. But he's a guy who has surprised this year, and I think a lot of people have been really excited about what they've seen. But I think if you start him, you could be greatly disappointed.
Yeah, and I think a large part of that has just been had been pretty consistent, and then these tight ends, man, this year are just absolutely brutal in fantasy. I feel like I know the tight end in the past has been bad, but this year just seems like it's absolute brutal out there.
It really is. It's a wasteland. So our next league loser, this could come to a surprise, and some of you may be really hoping for his return and that it could really spark your team. But we got tight end Dallas Goedert. He's Chicago, Dallas Cowboys, and New Orleans Saints.
Chicago's the lesser there, but those other two matchups, and no, they're no joke. Dallas Goedert is another one of those, top tier tight end type players. He might be able to kind of break up the matchups, but there might be some other tight ends out there. If there's a tight end that is facing Seattle or Arizona the week that he's facing the Cowboys, I'd go ahead and take that flyer because those teams just can't cover tight ends.
Yeah, and the thing with the Bears matchup too with Goedert is they're saying that, I believe the last I saw, they're expecting him back week 15. So he's going to be back for the first time, and this is a team that has Super Bowl aspirations, and Goedert is a big part of that offense for them. So how much can we rely on him being that involved in the offense? Will he have a huge snap count, or are they going to kind of ease him in? I wouldn't be surprised if they did. Then after that, you've got Dallas, and then you got New Orleans. I think both of them are very difficult matchups. Like you said, you've got some much more ideal matchups. And if you're chasing the points, it's hard not to consider, an alternative there, because Goedert might not get you points.
I think the one saving grace that might be out there for Eagles and your fantasy players, and whether or not how competitive they'll be at the end of the year here, is if the Vikings are still able to keep winning and kind of be in that race for the number one seed. But if that falls off, then there's really no reason for the Eagles to keep fighting. And also the Cowboys are in that consideration as well because they're fighting for the division too. So
that's a good point. I didn't even think about that, but that is an additional wrinkle to consider because they've only lost one game. So they do have quite a lead, compared to the other NFC, teams that are fighting for a playoff spot. Yeah. So our last league loser is another guy coming off injury. We're not expecting too much from. His tight end Darren Waller, supposed to be coming back in week 15. He's got the Patriots, Pittsburgh Steelers, and then the 49ers.
Yeah, Darren Waller owners very well could be excited for him to come back, but man, those are some tough matchups to come back to. And, given the rapport that Carr has shown with Devontae Adams recently, I don't know, with those tough matchups, if Waller just comes in and assumes a big role in that offense either. And then also Renfro's coming back too. So, it's just one of those things I think you could probably do better.
Yeah, I mean, the Pittsburgh matchup doesn't scare me as much, but the Niners matchup is for real. That one, we talked about, that defense is definitely legit. And, obviously in New England, they have a tendency to shut down certain players. And here's the thing, Waller's going to be coming back. How involved is he going to be in? Same thing with Goedert, right? Like, is he going to have full 100% snaps? That's the team that is trying to make the playoff push. So maybe they'll say, no, we got to use him. But like you said, Adams and Jacobs has really been the fuel for that engine. And I don't think they're going to change away that formula. It's been working for them. They've been getting wins. This team is hot. So I think they're not going to change up their game plan just because Waller and Renfro are coming back.
Yeah, 100%. I wouldn't anticipate that changing from Jacobs and Adams. Like you said, it's been their bread and butter down the stretch, and they've been winning games because of it.
So that was our league losers. We decided to do something a little bit differently because many of you may be seeing different videos around league winners. Well, it just so happens that our next video, we're going to be talking about some league winners. It's easy enough for us to say who we think our losers are going to be, but we're going to give you some options that are possibly in redraft leagues, possibly on your wire, or in dynasty leagues, or possibly deep leagues. These are players that are on your bench, and they could be good options for you to pivot from these players that we talked about as possible league losers. So we are a new channel, and we try to create several videos on a weekly basis. So you can support us by liking this video, subscribing to our channel, hitting that notification bell, and if you go ahead and put some comments down below. Do you agree with us on some of the league losers that we've identified, and do you have some other ones that you're concerned about or worried? Go ahead and put them in the comment section, and we would be happy to reply. So thanks so much for watching, and until next time.